Hello everyone! For today's lesson, we are going to talk about Module 5, which is Viewing Reading as Development. But before we go on with our discussion, let us read first the three objectives that we should tackle after studying this module. First is to enumerate and discuss the stages of reading development in both Fry's and Child's model. 2. Compare and contrast or reconcile the two models. 3. Draw implications from the developmental view for reading instruction. So let's define now what is developmental reading. So when we say developmental reading, it is a pattern and sequence of normal reading growth and skill development in a child in the learning to read process. It is the process in which students make a habit of reading continuously and not only when necessary. So when we say developmental reading, it refers to a comprehensive reading program which consists of several periods of stages. These periods usually coincide with the developmental stages of growth of the individual. It is also believed that one progresses gradually in acquiring and developing certain skills. So we have here the diagram which shows reading as an interplay of one's experience, oral language, and ability to interpret the written or printed symbols for that language. Oral language consists of symbols that stands for experiences, while the written or printed symbols that represents oral language are therefore also a representation of experiences. According to Jennings, the reading of Circle C is the culmination of all other kinds of reading. We cannot read Circle C unless we have become skilled in all the other kinds, and that is circles A and B. The relationship of the three circles is also reciprocal or complementary. It is true that Circle A developed first, followed by Circle B, then by Circle C. However, once an individual has acquired a language, he uses it to learn more experiences. Similarly, once he has learned to read, Circle C becomes a very powerful tool for learning, even more so than oral language. The arrow that has been added reflects Fry's view of reading as a process of transfer from auditory symbol to visual symbols. Let's come now to Fry's three stages of reading. First is the transfer stage or the learning to read period. It is the period during which the child learns a new set of signals or the visual symbols like letters, spelling patterns, punctuation marks that stands for auditory symbol or the oral language that he already knows. A child is assumed to have learned to respond or initiate an action through speaking, which he or she is able to learn through listening. Yet this prior skill does not mean a child's awareness of its utility in context. Learning to read means that a child learns through oral language or the auditory symbol. A child learns habits as a response to patterns, graphic shapes, but not new language. Learning to read phase begins around the time children enter kindergarten, when they begin to understand the correspondence between letters and sounds and benefits from systematic and explicit instruction to understand how to crack the alphabetic code. They learn to decode words of increasing difficulty with automaticity, and they learn to recognize many irregular words by sight. So we have the 5 types of graphic shapes to be learned during the transfer stage. First is the space direction sequence. In speech, words are represented by sounds produced in sequence. Writing the pattern of graphic shapes must in some way represent the sequence. In Filipino and in English, the space direction is a horizontal sequence of letter groups in parallel lines from left to right. In Arabic writing, the space direction used is also horizontal but from right to left, while in Chinese writing uses a vertical sequence proceeding from top to bottom. in columns beginning at the right with each successive column to the left of the preceding one. This strategy depends on learning every printed word along with its spoken form. Later, children reach the alphabetic stage of reading and are able to sound out new words based on a knowledge of letter sounds. The important thing to remember is whatever space directional sequence is used, it must be learned. The implication then is to develop in the Filipino beginning reader the habit of moving his eyes from left to right until it becomes automatic. When it becomes so, then the pupil responds to the space direction sequence of letters on the printed page as completely as he responds to the time sequence in speech. So we have the identification of letters or the alphabet. Fries recommends patterns of those that occur frequently in the first materials to be read must be recognized in contrast with one another. For example, in English, these 12 letters form the sequences of many words found in the talk of a 5-year-old. So we have letters A, T, H, M, F, C, S, B, R, P, D, and N. Following the same principle, in Filipino, we would expect the letters A, M, S, O, T, I, N to be included in the first letters to be learned. In both English and Filipino, the letters Q, J, X, and V are not part of this group. With the questions, are they alike or different? This priority letter should then be presented in sequences of 2 to 3 letters. So we have some example. At, hat, mat, map, nap, tap, pat, fat. So we have the other graphic shapes. Letter E is the numerals. Specifically, in Hindu-Arabic numerals stands for the number words that child already knows orally. So we have the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. Letter B is the graphic sign for mathematical processes, which are also word signs like the numerals such as the addition sign, subtraction sign, and the equal sign. Next is the abbreviation, which represents words or sequence of words. For example, Mr., Mrs., Doctor, Miss, AM, and PM. D is the punctuation marks or the graphic signs which is not found in the oral language like the period, question mark, comma, exclamation point, colon, and semicolon, and etc. Last is the language signals not represented in writing such as intonation patterns. So let's come now to the Stage 2, which is the productive stage. This is the period which the child's reading becomes fluent and automatic, that he no longer pays conscious attention to the shapes and patterns of the letters on a page. So the construction of meaning is now automatic through inference making, analysis, and synthesis. In this phase, students are expected to independently gain information and build knowledge and critical thinking skills as a result of what they have read. Moreover, they are expected to decode increasingly more complex words that require them to understand the meaning of the morphemes in the word to support their text comprehension. The last stage is the vivid imaginative realization of vicarious experience or verb. This occurs when the reading process becomes so automatic that reading is used equally with or even more than live language in the acquiring and developing of experience. So students are able to access their background knowledge to gain insight into and connect with written text. At this stage, readers begin to more fully develop their understanding of meanings that are not explicitly stated. Independent readers are exposed to strategies that they can use to increase their understanding of what they read, and they continue to learn new words that help with comprehension. Fries ends his discussion of the stages of reading with this thought: learning to read has no end. We believe that we know better than formerly where to begin and how. We believe that we must give thorough and systematic practice not only through the transfer stage but through the building up of a superior ability to read productively. Nor must we stop before we go as far as possible in teaching our students to really read literature. So it means that in learning how to read, teacher must not stop teaching after the transfer stage but rather continue till the developmental stage. Say for example, teaching reading printed symbols up to the time that students could fully assimilate and convey with utmost understanding and comprehension of what he or she is reading. And that's the time that the students are already productive enough for themselves.